welcome back to Our Issues Milwaukee. I'm your host, Andrea Williams. If you are just tuning in, our focus this morning is on education as we get one step closer to Wisconsin's general election coming up on Tuesday, April 6th. My guests this morning are candidates for Wisconsin's top education official, State Superintendent of Public Instruction. I just spoke with Dr. Jill Underly, and I'm now being joined by Dr. Deborah Kerr. How are you?
Good day. Honored to be here, Andrea. Thank you for the invitation.
I appreciate you taking the time out to talk to us today. And first and foremost, I always like to give our viewing audience a chance to know a little bit more about you. So if you would tell us more about your background and why you feel that you are the best candidate for this position of State Superintendent.
Thank you. I have been involved and dedicated my life to education for the last 40 years. I'm parochial educated and public school dedicated. I started teaching in a private school. I've opened up a charter school, and I've been a school finance instructor at the university level. And so I have this varied experiences that I think will be very helpful as we try to recover from this pandemic. I'm an award-winning teacher, principal, administrator, athletic basketball coach, back-to-back state championship coach in girls basketball, and a superintendent in the great state of Wisconsin for 20 years. I started out as a rural school superintendent in 4K through 8th grade Wilmot Grade School in Western Kenosha County. And I was the superintendent, the principal, the business manager, and the curriculum director, but I did not drive the bus, but I did shovel snow and did playground duty every single day. And then it was not north to Brown Deer. So I just did my fond farewell from Brown Deer, 13 years of service in the most culturally diverse, rich suburban district in the state of Wisconsin. I always say we put the urban in suburban because when I got there, we had 20% students of color and 20% economically disadvantaged. But when I left, we became a microcosm of America with 80% students of color and 50% economically disadvantaged. And so why I'm running for Wisconsin State Superintendent of Public Instruction, it's time to put the instruction back into the job. Wisconsin has the worst achievement gaps between Black and white students in the country for the last 10 years. And I want to replicate the scalable activities that I did in Brown Deer to not only close gaps, raise achievement, and have the highest graduation rates between Black and white students in the state. I want to replicate those scalable activities across the state and start with reading. I think we need to get back to the basics, teaching phonics, helping kids get on an upward growth trajectory of learning how to read, because we all know that reading is the gateway to life and to a future career. So I'm excited to run for this position because I know we can work together to create a world-class system that is the best system, highest performing in the country. And that's just my goal and something that I can promise.
Wow. In a nutshell, you did that well.
Yes.
So there is a lot of talk, Dr. Kerr, about systemic racism and how it affects healthcare. And we really have seen this throughout this pandemic. Healthcare and, of course, education falls under that umbrella as well. So you talked about the Brown Deer School District that you were the superintendent for, having a minority enrollment of some 76%, majority Black. So if you take on this role, talk about how the things that fall under the whole column of systemic racism that create a lot of the inequities and disparities that we see in our public school system, not only in Wisconsin, but across the country. How do you go about filtering that out and changing the narrative?
Well, the first thing on my agenda right now is we need to get our kids back in school now, quickly and safely. And so I believe that a part of the inequities, we are exacerbating these inequities that we knew existed before COVID-19 because our urban school districts are not back to school 5 days a week, face-to-face instruction, while their white counterparts, 70% of the kids in Wisconsin are back to school and they're white and they've been in school since September 1st. So I'm going to call it out And so this is something that's, I believe it's really important, is that we have to acknowledge that when these inequities are happening, that we have to deal with them and deal with them quickly and effectively. And so that's one thing that I will work on right away, get our kids back into school, because we are going to be in this recovery for many years if we don't. Addressing the whole entire equity, diversity, and inclusion issues across our great state is going to require leadership from the Department of Instruction that really has been paralyzed, in my opinion, through this pandemic. And so I want to work with the stakeholders to create an Office of Diversity and Inclusion that will give us a common language and training all across the state so that we can come together and have these critical conversations face to face around a table about race, about inequities, about marginalization. What does that look like in each of our communities? Because each community is going to be approaching this a little differently. And so my leadership team will do just that, creating an equity and inclusion vision with goals that we can set that will involve high quality training, but to have the voices of all those stakeholders involved. And that's teachers, educators, parents, students, and business leaders. I think we need to come to the table and have collective impact to get higher outcomes. And we can do just that.
And since we are on the subject of race, on the day of the primary election, you did find yourself in somewhat of a controversial situation because you made a comment on social media in reference to the N-word. And there was a question saying something along the lines of, what's the worst experience you've had dealing with the N-word? And you responded that when you were in high school, you were called that because your lips were bigger than most. So you did apologize, but what do you say to those who are watching who felt that that was not only offensive, but felt like that's really the wrong mindset to be in a position to lead all of our children of different colors and backgrounds?
Well, first of all, I've been on social media for 10 years. So this, not just during this campaign, I've been on LinkedIn, Twitter for many, many years, promoting the school district, promoting Brown Deer and women in leadership roles. And so that, that was a question that I thought was directed to a lot of different people, and I made that mistake. It was my misjudgment. And I guess I come from a community that's diverse and willing to speak their truth and have these conversations. And so I, made a mistake, and I realized that my actions of shutting down my account also created some controversy too, which made it worse, I think, because that's exactly the wrong thing to do. You need to hear people. And when I saw a question by a fellow colleague that says, that question wasn't for you, I'm like, yeah, it wasn't. And so as a white superintendent who's had these conversations and have advocated for my Black and brown kids, it was hurtful. And but I restored my account. I'm back up and running and promoting the goodness of all the things that we're trying to accomplish. And so what I should have done is talked about the time that there was a football team that called my quarterback the N-word. That's probably what I should have talked about more, because I stood up for my kids. I advocated for them because the adults involved in the entire situation did not do anything about it. And so I brought people together. And so these are the examples that I have. I'm not going to be perfect in this space, but I'm going to learn. And I have learned a lot from this situation. And so I took my athletic conference, my athletic directors, the superintendents, and the principals. We came together and we said, we're going to write a diversity and harassment policy so that this doesn't happen again. And then we also put it to the state level, the WIAA, and they are looking at it right now. So I think it's important that we take action, but do it in a way that is inclusive of all people.
I thank you for answering that. So with the time we have, I think it's important to talk about you and your opponent. You disagree on several things, and one is which of course is the law that was passed a decade ago that effectively ended collective bargaining for teachers as well as cut their pay. You support Act 10. Can you talk about why you are in support of that law?
There isn't a superintendent across the state that didn't utilize the tools that were afforded to us to balance our budgets. And so what we always did in Brown Deer, we always worked with the teachers. And so we worked collaboratively. We didn't overreach, but we needed to make some kind of bold changes. And so I did take advantage of all those tools, and we saved teachers' jobs by doing it. And the other thing is, I've always advocated for teachers and putting more teachers into profession, unlike some of the unions that have said, don't ever go into teaching again. You know, and that's really sad, because we need the best and brightest to go into our profession. And so I've intentionally created a diverse teaching staff, administrative team at Brown Deer, and I'm tapping kids on the shoulder and paraprofessionals to come into the profession, because we need more representation of for our students. The kids need to see people who look like them. And so I'm pro teacher, and it was a situation, we dealt with it, and we need to move forward.
And as far as the private school voucher program, your opponent, Dr. Underly, wants to freeze enrollment under the private school voucher program. She says it takes away from the public school system, and you, on the other hand, are in support of it. In a couple of minutes, can you help everyone understand your stance on that?
Well, I have been an equity, a champion of equity in my whole entire career, through my teaching career, through my administrative career. And I really feel that's very disingenuous of my opponent, because you know what? The state superintendent oversees all kids across the state of Wisconsin. And if we are going to create a great education system, a world-class system that's the highest performing, we need to make sure all kids have the capacity and ability and access to a high-quality education. And so I do feel that my Black and brown parents have made choices to go to private or school choice schools. She herself made the decision to send her children to private schools. So I just think she's being very hypocritical in not allowing our parents of school choice to have that voice. And so I support school choice and voucher schools wholeheartedly, and I will continue to make sure they have a voice and a seat at the table. There will be a leader of school choice on my DPI leadership team moving forward.
All right, and this, of course, is a nonpartisan race, but
Yes.
it's very interesting that as we go along, it's becoming a little bit polarized. So you describe yourself as a pragmatic Democrat, but you've been endorsed by former Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker and Republican State Senator Alberta Darling. So what would you say sets you apart from your opponent in this race as we wrap up?
I have always been a bridge builder and a unifier, and my intention from the very beginning, I have set up a bipartisan team. I've got Dems, Republicans, independents, superintendents, teachers, economists, strategists, and I'm going to prove that we can unify around education, because that's exactly what we're going to need moving forward. So yes, I have a lot of fiscal conservative values, but I also have other values that are important to making sure that all kids have access and opportunity for a great education. And I am the most uniquely prepared and qualified for this job, and I can start on day one.
Well, I thank you so much for coming by and sharing your thoughts and your opinions with us. And it goes without saying, I wish you the very best.
Very good. And get out the vote. April 6th is very, very important. The education is about our future. Thank you.
Dr. Deborah Kerr is a candidate for State School Superintendent. For more information on Dr. Kerr and where she stands on the issues, you can visit her website at kerr4kids.com. And keep in mind, as she said, Wisconsin's general election is coming up on Tuesday, April 6th. If you have any questions, you can visit milwaukee.gov or call 414-286-VOTE. That's 286-8683. That is going to do it for today's show. I'm your host, Andrea Williams. As always, thank you for watching, and I do hope you join us again next week as we take another look at our issues, Milwaukee. Have a great day.